Hey babe, did I wake you? Okay, that's good. What are you doing up? You've been awake this whole time? Oh my goodness. We have got to get you back on a regular sleep schedule. You need your rest. Hmm? Yeah, I'm just in here breaking down coverages for the next game. Oh, I have to do them right now because Coach needs them in the morning. It's hard to plan what you want the offense to do until you know what plays will work against the defense's coverages. Oh, have I never explained coverages to you? Ah, bad football boyfriend. Can't have my babe not knowing how this works. Do you want to lie down while I talk to you? Maybe it'll just drift off while I talk. Okay, so the offense can advance the ball by taking the ball and running with it, or they can pass it from one player to another. When they decide to pass it, the defense assigns some players to pass rush, which means they go try to tackle the passer, and the rest of the defenders play coverage, which means they try to prevent the offense's receivers from catching the ball. Most of the time, a defense is going to have 4 players pass rush, and the remaining 7 defenders will play coverage. If you rush 5 or more, it's called a blitz. If you only rush 3 players, it's called a drop 8 coverage. Because the remaining 8 defenders are in coverage. When players are in coverage, they move backwards away from the ball, so that's why we call it a drop 8, because they're dropping into coverage. The easiest type of coverage to understand is man-to-man coverage. We also shorten it by just saying man. Basically, every defender is assigned a receiver to cover, and they just follow that player around. If they go deep, you go deep. If they break out towards the sidelines, you go with them, etc. Every coverage has its disadvantages, and one of the biggest problems for man coverage is matchups. So, say a defender is a lot slower or shorter or less skilled than the receiver. And that's a problem because the offense only has to win 1 matchup out of 5 to complete a pass, and they can exploit that matchup again and again. Another type of coverage, which is called zone coverage, eliminates matchups because defenders aren't guarding a receiver, they're covering part of the field. So, for instance, cover 3 is one of the most common types of zone coverages at every level. It's called cover 3 because it has 3 deep defenders. They're going to divide the field into thirds starting about 10 yards away from where the ball is, and they're each responsible for one of these thirds. Essentially, they divide the field into 3 tubes starting from 10 yards out all the way to the end zone. If any receiver enters their tube, they're going to cover him. The remaining 4 defenders will divide those first 10 yards into 4 zones and each cover 1. One of the main differences between man and zone coverage is where a defender is looking. In man coverage, you're always looking at your receiver. How can a defender cover them if they don't know where they are? They have to be looking at the receiver that they're in coverage on. In zone coverage, the players are looking back toward the quarterback. They can read his eyes to see where he's looking to throw the ball and shuffle more to that area. They still stay within their assigned zone, but might end up more to one part of it depending on where the receivers are going and where the quarterback is looking. By not covering a specific receiver, matchups are eliminated. On the other hand, one of the disadvantages to zone is that you're assigning defenders deep or short without any ability to adapt what the offense is doing. So, if I've got 3 deep defenders and you send 4 receivers deep, I'm a player short. What modern defenses do to combat this is to play pattern match coverage, or what's simply called match coverage. In a match coverage, defenders are assigned a player just like in man coverage, but their assignment can adapt to what the offense does on the play. For instance, in the match version of Cover 3, it solves the zone version's problem of 4 receivers going deep. It does this because even though there are still 3 deep defenders to start, 2 of the players covering those first 10 yards can adapt into deep defenders if the offense sends 4 players deep. How that works out is the outermost deep defenders will take the outermost receivers, while 2 of the short area defenders will cover the innermost of the 4 receivers. Meanwhile, the middle deep third player, so an original deep defender who's in the very middle, they become a free defender, so they're able to help cover on any deep routes. The best part is there's still 2 defenders in those first 10 yards to cover the offense's 5th receiver. Match coverage seems like the best of both worlds, and it really can be in some ways, but it still can run into some of the matchup problems that man has. If the offense understands the rules of the match coverage, they can also find ways to break it. Pretty much all coverages have their advantages and disadvantages. The defense is really just doing its best to take away the offense's favorite plays. If you can make it difficult for an offense to use its best plays, you're forcing them to try and win while playing left-handed. And yes, I'm assuming the offense is right-handed. Most offenses actually are. A blitz is pretty similar to a basic coverage. Remember how I said a blitz is sending 5 or more rushers while coverage is only sending 4 or 3? However many defenders aren't blitzing are still playing coverage. They can actually still play man, zone, or pattern match coverages, they're just doing it with fewer defenders. One of the most popular types of blitz coverage is a form of match cover 3. There are still 3 deep defenders, but now there's only 3 players in the underneath coverage, which is that first 10 yards. 2 of the underneath defenders can still adapt to cover deep routes. It just means you only have 1 defender to cover the entire width of the field inside 10 yards. The trade-off is now you have 5 defenders coming after the quarterback. If the offense is using all 5 receivers, that means they only have 5 blockers, 1 for each rusher. While the math might sound like it favors the offense, that means if 1 blocker messes up, the quarterback is in trouble. Just like the defense has a problem if a bad defender is forced to cover a good receiver, the offense is at a disadvantage if a bad blocker is matched up against a good pass rusher. The defense will also attempt to confuse the blockers by making it look like the defense is blitzing from one place only to blitz from another. Or they might have a rusher engage a blocker while another blitzer loops around to the other direction. Again, if there's any confusion, the quarterback might get hit. The offense can choose to keep receivers in to help block, but that means they have fewer players to go catch the ball. A cover 0 blitz takes it 1 step further. Cover 0 is a form of man coverage. Teams that like to play man coverage, where it's the actual coverage with only 4 defenders, usually play cover 1. Even though it's a man coverage, it's called cover 1 because there's 1 deep defender helping out on any deep routes, sort of like he did in cover 3 match against the 4 deep routes. Cover 1 is safer because if a defender loses his matchup, there's still the deep zone player to help make a touchdown saving tackle. Because remember, man coverage means the defenders are watching their assigned receiver, not the quarterback. They often don't know the ball is being thrown, so they can't help out other players. Cover 0, on the other hand, means there are 0 deep defenders. Nobody's in zone. Anyone who loses their matchup might be responsible for a touchdown. The flip side is the defense will always have an unblocked rusher coming for the quarterback. The standard cover 0 has 6 defenders rushing against 5 blockers. The math is against the offense. But let's say the offense leaves a receiver in to block. The defender whose job it was to cover him man-to-man now becomes an extra rusher. What does that look like? Well, let's say the offense thinks a blitz is coming, so the running back stays next to the quarterback to block instead of running out to become a receiver. So now there's 6 blockers against the original 6 rushers, but the defender assigned to cover the running back now rushes. So it becomes 7 defenders on 6 blockers. If the offense keeps the running back and the tight end to block, the defenders covering the running back and the tight end become the 7th and 8 rushers. So now it's 8 rushers against 7 blockers. Technically, the offense could block 10 players. They can't block 11 because someone has to hold the ball. I mean, they would never do that because there would be no receivers, but let's pretend that they did have 10 blockers. So the defense could send all 11 players on a 0 blitz, and they would still have an unblocked rusher because it would be 11 on 10. The defense is always about balancing risk and reward. Sure, cover 0s offer a sure thing in rush, but they are 1 bad defender away from a touchdown, so that's kind of scary. Rushing 5 is safer, but you're relying on trickery or matchups to sack the quarterback. Playing cover 7 is much safer, but if your 4 rushers can't get pressure, then the quarterback can just stand there calmly making reads and pick apart even a good coverage with unhurried throws. So you can see how important it is for me to understand what the other team's defense is doing. If you know what their top coverages and blitzes are, we can decide how we want to counteract them. Every defense has a base, which is the main coverage they like to run. They usually have some ways of changing it up so they keep you on your toes, and some blitzes to pressure the quarterback. Like a team that uses zone cover 3 as their base might have a coverage like cover 1, a man coverage, as a change-up because the 2 coverages might look similar at first blush, and they use similar techniques, but they have different weaknesses. We also like to see what their tendencies are in various game situations. Does the coach like to blitz in passing situations or play coverage? Does he prefer certain coverages versus certain offensive formations? Yeah, so anyway, right now I'm going through and inputting all this information while I'm using this video tagging system. So I'm typing in that the offense is in X formation and the other team is in Y defense. What the offense runs is called, what coverage or blitz the defense is playing, what's the game situation, etc., etc. The system will then break it into percentages to give us an overview of what we might be facing. Luckily, most of the offenses this team has played are similar to ours in style, so we actually have an easier time breaking it down. I mean, sometimes, especially at the lower levels, the offenses are so different it's practically like they're playing a different sport. A defense might end up playing something completely different from their normal base to try and stop this funky offense. But anyway, I'm almost done, thankfully, because I'm getting pretty tired too. Are you still awake? How about that when I finish up, I come cuddle you. Okay?